This lesson, we're going to be looking at JavaScript objects, and I guarantee you're going to love objects. The way that objects work is what we saw earlier, where if we have a person and then we can assign some type of value to that person. So whenever we refresh and if we type person here, we know that person is equal to this value. So objects are a little bit more interesting than that. And they give us the ability to have some properties associated to the different values. So we can have person, but person can contain multiple different properties within it. So let me show you what I mean. So let's go ahead and we're going to declare person, but we're going to do this one as an object. So refresh and go back down to person. And this is where we use those curly brackets. And these are the famous ones for JavaScript, of course, because we do a lot of stuff with these curly brackets. So we've got person, and right now this object is pretty empty. So let's do some values in the person. So person can have a first name. Person can also have a last name. And so what we're doing is we're separating it with a dot, and that's giving us the ability to add multiple things into person. So let's see what person contains now. So person not only is just the person object, we've got multiple values that are contained within here. And then if we want to access those values, we write it out the same way that we set them, where we do person first, person last, and so on. So essentially it gives us a way to contain various properties together. So let's go back to our earlier lesson, and we saw that we could create a function like this and have it output and do something. So it would be console log, and this one would be fun1. Now there's also another way to create functions, and you can create it as a variable and then declare it as a function. And then within the function, we do the same type of format where now we're going to console log out, and this time, what do you think it's going to be? It's going to be fun2. So let's refresh that. And this time, let's do fun2. So we see that the fun2 works the exact way as the function did earlier. So that means that we can also use it within that same type of format. So we can invoke it as a method. So we could have something like message and then equal that to function. And then within there, hello world. So that's going to be the message that's coming from this particular person. So let's do a refresh and person. And now they've got a function that's associated with them, and then you can call that function within this type of format. So everything is contained within person. We've got first name, we've got last name, and we've got a message that we can invoke. We can also do things like numbers, of course. So we could do an age, and I'm not going to tell you my real age, so it's not my real age. Alive, and then we could do true, so we could do Boolean values. So now when I type in person, you can see that it contains all of this wonderful information. And that gives us access to it within that same object, which is really useful because we can contain everything within that same format. We can also return back hello world here. And we can also customize what we're returning, because now we've got access to the content that's contained within this object. So if we do something like this, first, it's going to return back the value of first name. So let's try that out. And it says hello world, or hello Lawrence. So let's update the person's first name, and we'll equal that to, and now let's invoke person message, and we see that it's changed because we have access to those values. And this is where I used an interesting one where I used this, because in some cases, we might want to use this, and we might want it to be dynamic. We can also keep it at person first as well, and that will do the same thing. So this time, if we change person, let's change the name of person first. So now the message is hello, Lisa. So that was something to keep in mind as well, and we are going to look at this in the later lessons. But essentially, when you use this, it refers to the current active object, and that's what's known as the this keyword. So whatever the owner of this particular object is, and that's person, that's where this is going to take place. And this is a keyword in JavaScript, and it can be used in a number of different ways. So that's just one way to use this. There's also a short format as well, where you can take person1, and we're going to create a new object, and then list out all of those values so we can give him a first name. And this is separated by the colon. So the one on the left-hand side, the property name, doesn't need to have quotes around it. And the property one, you can list them out. So we can do last. And in this way, it does always look a lot neater as well. So I'm not going to list out everything, but I think you get the point there, that person1 and person. And then if you want to update content in person1, you do it within the same thing, where you can do first and then equals. So you can do something like Lawrence if you wanted to, and so on. And then now person1 is going to contain that new value. So this again is a nice way to work with JavaScript objects. And there's one other thing before we conclude the lesson. There's another way. So we saw that if we want to retrieve the information, we can do it within the same way that we're setting it up. And there's also another way, and that's going to be the bracket format. So we can do the same value within brackets, where we use the square brackets, and then we indicate the property name in order to get the value back. So we could do something like person first, or we could do person last. And that's going to be actually equal to doing person first, person last, and so on. So those are two equivalent ways. And you can even set the values within this type of format. And generally, this is a little bit longer. Doing it within this type of format, it's a little bit more dynamic. And I'm going to show you an example of that coming up in the upcoming lessons as well. So now I've got an exercise for you to take a look around the room, or to think of something that you own and describe it as a JavaScript object. So if you have a car, for instance, do a full description of the car as an object. So list out some of the traits of it. So if you have a car, you can create an object called car and then update it and update the values that are contained within it.